I always believed my dad died in a car accident when I was 9. That's what my mom told me. She even cried at the made-up funeral. Said it was a closed casket because the crash was too awful. No body. No photos. Just a framed picture of him and a cheap urn filled with God knows what on the mantel. I believed it. I was a kid. But here's where it gets insane. I got a random email 2 weeks ago from someone named Henry Clark. Subject line? I know what happened to your father. I thought it was a scam, some creep trying to sell me fake ancestry reports or whatever. But the body of the email had a single line that stopped me cold. Your father is alive. He's in prison. And he didn't kill that man. I sat at my desk for 10 full minutes just blinking at the screen. At first I thought it was a sick joke. But then I remembered something weird I hadn't thought about in years. One night when I was 13, I snuck into the attic looking for old Christmas decorations and found a box labeled Ethan. That was my dad's name. Inside? A stack of unopened letters. All from the same prison. All addressed to my mom. All unopened. When I asked her about it the next morning, she freaked out. Said I was snooping, and grounded me for 2 weeks. But now, it all made sense. I called the number in the email. A man picked up. His voice was gravelly, like he'd smoked 1,000 cigarettes and swallowed a lawn mower. He said, You don't know me, but I was your dad's best friend. Your mom lied to protect herself, not you. He's in Ironwood Penitentiary. Has been for 23 years. He never stopped writing. That night, I confronted my mom. She didn't deny it. Not even a little. She just said, He was a violent man. I did what I had to do. That's when I knew everything I'd ever believed about my childhood was a lie. And I needed to find the truth. Starting with the man rotting in a prison cell, who might just be my real dad. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was spinning with questions, some that made me sick to my stomach. Why would my mom lie for 23 years? What did she mean by, He was a violent man? And if she was lying about that, what else wasn't true? The next morning, I called Ironwood Penitentiary. I felt like a lunatic. Hi, yes, I'd like to visit Ethan Rourke. I think he might be my father? I expected the receptionist to laugh or hang up. But she didn't. She asked my name, put me on hold, and when she came back, she said, He's allowed visitors. Wednesdays or Saturdays. You'll need ID. I booked the first flight I could to Michigan. Ironwood was this gray, depressing monster of a building in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees and barbed wire. It smelled like rain, bleach, and bad choices. I walked through metal detectors with my heart hammering, palms sweaty like I was the one on trial. A guard led me down a corridor that felt like it belonged in a horror film. Cold, buzzing lights. Echoing footsteps. And then I saw him. Sitting behind a thick pane of scratched glass, wearing a faded orange jumpsuit, was a man with tired eyes and a crooked nose that looked vaguely familiar. His hair was mostly gray, but his posture was straight. He looked up when I walked in, and smiled. That's what shattered me. Because that smile was mine. It was like looking into a cracked mirror 20 years older. I picked up the phone and sat down. He picked up his. Daniel? He asked. Voice like warm gravel. Is it really you? I nodded, too choked up to speak. He looked like he'd been punched in the chest. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I thought. He had to stop and breathe. And then he said it. Your mom told everyone I was a murderer. But I didn't kill that man, Daniel. I swear to you. I didn't. I asked him the only thing I could think of. Then who did? His face changed. Not fear. Not confusion. Rage. He leaned forward and whispered. Brandon Wilkes. Her boyfriend. She helped him frame me. She loved him more than she loved us. And that's when everything cracked. Because Brandon Wilkes was the man who used to pick me up from school. I staggered out of that prison like someone had hit me in the head with a cinder block. Brandon Wilkes. That name had been buried in some dark, dusty corner of my memory. I hadn't thought about him in years, but once I did, it all came flooding back. He was the guy who moved in right after Dad. Died. The guy who told me to call him Uncle Brandon, but would get mad if I didn't say Dad when we were in public. He was always around. Always watching. Always a little too nice. I remembered him pulling me aside when I was 10 and saying, "Your real father was dangerous, Danny. He hurt your mom. You're better off without him." At the time, I believed it. But now, I remembered something else. Something small, but sharp as glass. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night and caught Brandon sneaking back into the house through the side door. It was winter, and he had blood on his hands. Literally. I thought he'd cut himself, but when I asked, he said, "Go back to sleep, Danny. Grown-up stuff." I was 11. Back then, I thought maybe he'd hurt himself. Or maybe he was hunting or something. But now I knew. Back in my hotel room, I called Uncle Henry again. "What do you know about Brandon Wilkes?" There was a pause on the line. Then Henry said, "You're not gonna like this. Brandon wasn't just some random rebound boyfriend. He'd worked with my mom at the hospital. Maintenance crew. He had a record, a sealed juvenile one, but rumors followed him. Petty theft. A knife fight. Then poof, everything cleaned up when he turned 18. Henry said, "Brandon was obsessed with your mom. Everyone knew. She was married, but that didn't stop him from hanging around. Then suddenly your dad's arrested for stabbing a guy in a bar bathroom? Didn't add up." I told him about the letters. About the attic. About my mom burning everything related to Dad. I asked, "Why didn't you say something back then?" Henry sounded wrecked. "Your mom threatened me with a restraining order. Said I was confusing you. I didn't know what to do. I tried to get custody, but the court sided with her. I'm sorry, Danny. I should have fought harder." I sat there, shaking, staring at the wall. Brandon had taken my dad's life, freedom, and family, and worn it like a mask for 20 years. And I'd let him. That night I called my mom. She answered on the third ring, cheerful, like we were just catching up. "Hey, honey! Everything okay?" I didn't waste time. "Why did you lie about Dad? Why did you help Brandon frame him?" Silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard before, cold and clipped, "You've been talking to Ethan. Not your dad. Not even him. Just Ethan. Like he was a stranger. Tell me the truth," I said. But she didn't. She hung up. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about justice. This was going to be war. I booked a flight home that same night. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. I needed to see the house again with new eyes. The place where I grew up, laughed, scraped my knees, did algebra homework, all while a murderer sat at the dinner table carving chicken and calling himself Dad. When I pulled into the driveway the next morning, the front of the house looked smaller than I remembered. Same blue shutters. Same mailbox with the dent from when I tried to skateboard off the porch and took it out with my face. The door opened before I even got out of the car. Mom stood there in her bathrobe, holding a coffee mug like she was starring in a sitcom. No makeup. No smile. She didn't say, "Welcome home." She said, "You've been digging." I got out, slammed the door, and said, "You gonna lie again, or are we finally telling the truth?" She didn't flinch. Just sipped her coffee like we were discussing weather. "Whatever you think you know, it's more complicated than that." "No, Mom," I snapped. "It's actually really simple. Dad didn't kill that man. You and Brandon framed him. And I want to know why." She turned and walked inside like she expected me to follow. And I did, because I needed to hear it, needed it on record. The living room looked the same, but I noticed things now. The family pictures didn't include my dad. Just me and her and Brandon. Like he'd always been there. Like he'd always belonged. We sat across from each other. Like a chess match. She sighed and said, "Your father, he wasn't the man you remember." I leaned forward. "Stop. Just stop. I talked to him. I read his letters. I saw the footage, Mom. I know what Brandon did." Her face twitched at that. "What footage?" "Bingo. The bar's security tapes," I said. "Brandon went in before Dad. Came out after the guy was already dead. You really didn't think anyone would ever check? She went quiet for a long time. Then, she finally said it. I was pregnant. With Brandon's baby. That's why. I blinked. What? She laughed bitterly. I didn't plan it. But Ethan was working 2 jobs, always tired, always angry. Brandon was there. And then that man ended up dead. And Brandon said if Ethan went down for it, we could start over. No more sneaking around. No more hiding. My stomach turned. So you just let him rot? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I told myself Ethan would be better off. He was already depressed, always overwhelmed. I thought prison might. I don't know. Stabilize him. Stabilize? I exploded. You ruined his life. She stood up, trembling. I ruined mine too. I stared at her, disgusted. Where's Brandon now? She looked at me for a long time. Then said quietly, he's dead. That stopped me cold. What? He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. In his sleep. I didn't believe her. Not yet. But she wasn't lying. Not about that. And then she added one final thing. There are letters. In the attic. Ones I did read. Ones I kept. My breath caught. That night I climbed up into the attic again. Same smell of dust and insulation. Same creaky floorboards. But in the far corner, tucked inside a shoebox beneath a blanket, was a stack of letters addressed to her. And every single one was signed. Love, Ethan. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, shoebox in my lap, surrounded by silence and 30 years' worth of secrets. The letters weren't dusty. Not really. The box had been opened. Reopened. Thumbed through. Some of the envelopes were soft at the seams like they'd been held too many times. I stared at the top one, postmarked the year after Dad's arrest. June 12, 2003. The handwriting was neat, careful. The kind of handwriting you use when you're trying to convince someone you're still human after being treated like a monster. I opened it with shaking hands. Lauren, I won't ask why you haven't responded. I'm sure Brandon's convinced you it's for the best. He always was persuasive. But I'm still your husband. And Daniel is still my son. I have to believe you'll come to your senses eventually. I didn't kill that man. You know I didn't. I saw the way Brandon looked at you even back then. I should have done something. Fought harder. I didn't think we'd fall apart like this. I dreamt of Daniel last night. He had a gap in his teeth and was missing a sock. He asked if I was coming home soon. I woke up sobbing. I had to stop. The words were vibrating in my hands. My chest felt tight. I flipped to another one. Then another. Each letter was a plea. Not just for freedom, but for truth. For the chance to hold his son again. For a response that never came. But one thing was clear. My mom read them. She kept them. Which meant the whole time she was building her perfect lie, she was also keeping a record of the truth in a dusty box above my childhood bedroom. I called Uncle Henry again. I said, I found the letters. All of them. He wrote for years. He came over the next morning, eyes red, like he hadn't slept. When I showed him the box, he didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, this changes everything. We took photos of every letter. Scanned them. Stored them in 3 different folders. Backed them up on flash drives. He said he knew a lawyer who specialized in wrongful convictions. Said the state might reopen the case. I told him Mom said Brandon was dead. He didn't look surprised. I always wondered. After she suddenly moved and changed her last name, I figured something went sideways. I paused. There's something else. I opened the last letter in the box. The one with no stamp. No postmark. Just a single word on the front in Dad's handwriting. Daniel. It was the only letter ever written to me. If you're reading this, it means either I'm gone, or someone finally told you the truth. I don't know which is worse. I tried to write you so many times, but the prison wouldn't let me unless your mother approved contact. I hope one day you find this box. That you'll know I never stopped trying. That I loved you every second, even from inside these walls. And that I didn't do it. I hope, wherever you are, you're safe. That you're loved. That you know you are not the child of a killer. You are my son. And that means something. Love. Dad. I couldn't breathe. Henry put a hand on my shoulder and said, "We're gonna fix this." I nodded. Because we had to. The man who raised me on letters deserved his life back. And I was going to burn down the lies that stole it from him. 3 weeks later, the case was reopened. It was surreal, like watching a Netflix docuseries about your own life. Lawyers, investigators, experts I couldn't pronounce, all combing through old evidence and newly unearthed truths. Henry's contact, a fast-talking woman named Geneva who wore combat boots and lipstick the color of blood, took one look at the letters and said, "We're gonna destroy whoever buried this." She meant it. She got the state to subpoena the original files from Dad's case. Turns out the police misplaced key witness statements. One bartender claimed he saw Brandon hanging around the bar every night the week before the murder, always asking about Ethan's shift. That statement? Never entered into evidence. Geneva also had the bar's security footage restored from backup. Digital forensics pulled a clearer image of Brandon entering the bathroom at 9:47 and exiting at 9:51, moments before the murder was discovered. And the cherry on top? Geneva found a private investigator who used to work for Brandon's previous landlord. The guy remembered Brandon bragging once at a poker night, said something about having a body count higher than his rent. I swear, some people are too stupid to be dangerous. But Brandon? He was the kind of dangerous that pretends to be stupid. With all that stacked up, Geneva filed for an emergency hearing. The judge reviewed the evidence personally. I was there when the court officer handed him the stack of letters from the attic. He held them for a long time. Then he said, "We need to get Mr. Rourke in here. Immediately." They brought Dad into the courtroom a week later. It was the first time I saw him in anything other than prison orange. They gave him a proper suit. It didn't fit perfectly. It was baggy around the shoulders, like it had belonged to a better time, but he stood taller than I'd ever seen him. I sat behind him with Henry. Mom didn't come. The judge read through the evidence, pausing often, lips pressed in a tight line. Then he turned to Dad and said, "Mr. Rourke, based on the overwhelming new evidence presented, including documented witness statements, surveillance footage, and correspondence suppressed during your trial, this court finds there is sufficient cause to vacate your conviction." And just like that, it was over. Well, not over. But the gavel came down, and for the first time in 23 years, my father was legally not a murderer. He turned around in his seat, locked eyes with me, and smiled through tears. It was the same smile I remembered from the picture on the mantel. The real one. The one Mom replaced with a lie. We walked out of that courthouse together, side by side. Reporters were outside, microphones outstretched, cameras rolling. One shouted, "Mr. Rourke, what's the first thing you're going to do now that you're a free man?" He looked at me, then said, "Take my son to lunch." Which is exactly what we did. At the same diner he used to take me to when I was little. He ordered pancakes. I ordered answers. Over pancakes and too much syrup, Dad told me the whole story. Not just the surface stuff. Not just, Brandon framed me, and your mom believed him. I mean everything. Turns out he suspected something was off long before the murder. Brandon had been around the house a lot, even when he wasn't supposed to be. Helping with home repairs. Fixing pipes that didn't need fixing. Bringing Mom flowers when Dad was working night shifts. At first, Dad thought Brandon was just awkward, clingy, maybe lonely. But then he caught him staring a little too long at Mom. Heard her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed with him in months. Then, 2 weeks before the murder, Dad walked into the house early from a shift and found Brandon sitting at the kitchen table, wearing his robe. Brandon played it off, said he was crashing there after a late project and didn't want to wake anyone. Mom backed him up. Said it was harmless. Said Dad was overreacting. She gaslit me so bad, I actually apologized, he said, cutting into his pancakes like they were his sworn enemy. Apologized for thinking it was weird another man was wearing my damn robe. Then the night of the murder came. Dad was covering a shift at the bar for a buddy. Regular Thursday night. Same faces, same drinks. Around 9:50 p.m. he ran to the bathroom. That's when he found the man, mid-40s, bleeding out by the sinks. He was still alive, gasping, eyes wide with terror. Dad shouted for someone to call 911 and tried to stop the bleeding, hands soaked in red. When the police arrived, they tackled him. Brandon had already slipped out. And Mom? She refused to visit him in jail. She never looked me in the eye again, he said. Not in court. Not after sentencing. She took you and disappeared like I never existed. He paused, staring at his plate like it owed him something. I used to think maybe she was scared. That Brandon forced her. But the truth is, she chose him. Whether out of love or fear, I don't know. But she chose him. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd spent my whole childhood believing my dad was dead. Meanwhile, the man who took his place had built his life out of lies, and my mom handed him the bricks. After lunch, we drove past my old middle school. Dad pointed at it and said, You got suspended once for drawing a mustache on George Washington's portrait. I saved the letter they sent home. I laughed so hard I almost cried. Because he remembered. All of it. Even the stuff I didn't. We pulled into Henry's driveway later that afternoon. Dad was staying with him for now until he figured out where to live. When we stepped out of the truck, Henry tossed Dad a key. To the basement fridge, he said. Where the beer lives. Dad grinned. Finally. Parole with benefits. But as we were walking up the steps, something fell off. The front door was open. Henry never left his door open. We exchanged a glance, and Dad's face changed instantly, sharp, alert, like he'd stepped back into the prison yard. He whispered, Stay behind me. We crept into the house. The living room was trashed. Cushions everywhere. Papers scattered. The shoebox with Dad's letters? Gone. And on the coffee table, scrawled in black marker across one of the scanned journal pages. You should have left it buried. My blood turned to ice. Brandon's dead, I whispered. Dad didn't answer. Because neither of us were sure anymore. The room felt like it was shrinking. That one sentence, you should have left it buried, hung in the air like poison. Dad just stood there, staring at it, every muscle in his body tight. I'd never seen him like that before. Not even in the courtroom. Henry came home 10 minutes later and froze when he saw the mess. He'd only gone out to grab groceries. Said the door was locked when he left. No sign of forced entry, no shattered windows. Whoever it was, had a key. I said it out loud without meaning to. Mom. Henry shook his head. No way. She wouldn't do this. But Dad didn't look so sure. We called the police anyway. They came, took photos, wrote a report, dusted for prints, though they didn't promise much. Could have been a junkie, one officer said, which made Dad laugh darkly. Sure, he muttered. A very literate junkie with a sharpa and a grudge. That night, we went through the house with flashlights and baseball bats like it was a haunted mansion. Henry insisted on checking the attic. Dad reinstalled the lock on the back door. I stayed up in the guest room, watching the hallway like a soldier. The next morning, Geneva, our lawyer, called. We found something, she said. It's unexpected. She emailed us an old transcript from a case in Tennessee, dated 6 years before Dad's arrest. Different names. Different charges. But the suspect? Brandon Wilkes. It had been expunged. Covered up. But Geneva had a friend in records who owed her a favor. The case? Domestic assault and witness tampering. The woman involved? A single mom with a young daughter. Brandon had been living with them. Guess how the case ended? The woman recanted. Refused to testify. Case dropped. 2 months later, she and her daughter moved out of state. No forwarding address. Dad stared at the file and said, This wasn't just about me. And suddenly it all made sense. Brandon wasn't just a murderer. He was a pattern. A predator. A shadow that moved from one desperate family to another, worming his way in, always vanishing just before the truth could catch up. Whether he was really dead or not, we didn't know. Geneva checked the death certificate. It existed. Signed, dated, filed in Ohio. But that didn't mean much. Paperwork can lie. Brandon certainly had. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in all caps. Inside? One photo. Me. At the diner with Dad. No note. No explanation. Just a timestamp in the corner, dated 2 days ago. I showed Dad. He didn't speak. He just pulled me into the tightest hug I've ever felt and whispered, "We keep going. We stay loud. We don't let him win again." And that's exactly what we've done. Geneva pushed forward with a full civil suit against the state for wrongful imprisonment. Dad was awarded $1. $2 million in damages. He gave half to Henry, said he wouldn't be free without him. The rest? College fund. Therapy. A used boat named Second Chance, that he now takes out every Sunday with me and Henry's kids. Mom moved away. I haven't seen her since. Sometimes she sends birthday cards. I don't open them. We still don't know if Brandon's alive. Maybe that was the point. The truth didn't save us. We saved each other. Every step. Every scar. And if he's out there watching, if he's planning something, if he thinks we're afraid, he's got another thing coming. Because this time, he won't be met with silence. He'll be met with fire. And we are ready.